Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. The Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome candidates for 3rd Congressional District. And we'll start with take 1 to 2 minutes. Actually, I should introduce myself. I'm Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor at the Columbian, and I'll let the board members introduce themselves.
Well, I'm Colleen Keller. I'm the assistant news editor of the Columbian and a member of the editorial board.
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian and Columbian.com.
Ben Campbell, co-owner and publisher of the Columbian.
Great, thank you. And now to the candidates. Take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you are running for this position, and then we'll move on to specific policy issues and start with John.
All right. My name is John Saulie-Rohman, and as you are aware, I'm running for the 3rd Congressional District. And I've never done this before in my life, but I just came to a point where I couldn't stand by and watch everything our country go the way it's going, and just our politicians that we elect to represent us, I don't feel like we're represented. And so I'm trying to bring some honesty and integrity into this conversation and be a voice for the people.
Great, thank you. Leslie?
I'm a 5th-generation Washingtonian, a former prosecutor, a current Kansas City Council member, and wife and mom to 4. And honestly, it was during COVID that I was just awoken to the atrocities happening to the people, the values in the country that I love. I felt like the world had been turned upside down. It was at that point I decided to get off the sidelines, and I ran for city council in Camas. And I personally knocked on 5,000 doors. I didn't have a team. I didn't have a walk list or anything. I knocked on everybody's door. I talked to them. I got elected and got a front row seat at even more problems facing Southwest Washington. And then in 2022, I watched, we lost our 3rd congressional seat to a progressive Democrat that I don't think reflects the values of Southwest Washington. And so I'm running because I think Southwest Washington deserves better. We deserve a representative who will focus on securing the southern border, limiting our government, fighting inflation so people can afford to buy groceries and put gas in their car at the same time, and a representative who will fight to put parents back in the driver's seat with respect to their children's education. And I have a proven track record of doing all of that and more at the city of Camas, and I intend to take that fight to Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you. And I should mention, we invited candidate Joe Kent to this forum. He declined to join us. And for this meeting, we did not invite incumbent Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. We will meet with her after the primary, before the general election. And we also will invite whichever other candidate advances. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's start with obviously one of the key issues, and Leslie touched on it, is the southern border. How should Congress approach that, and regarding immigration policy? And we'll start with Leslie.
So, yes, I see firsthand the effects of an unsecured southern border happening right here in Southwest Washington. It was the number one thing that people said they didn't want to have happen when I knocked on those 5,000 doors and continue to make phone calls and knock on doors. The number one thing people said is they don't want to see Southwest Washington become like Portland. They don't want the drugs, the crime, the homelessness. With the unsecured border, we have human trafficking, criminals, guns, and drugs coming straight up the I-5 corridor and taking root in our communities. I think the DEA in Washington State in 2023 seized 4.8 million lethal doses of fentanyl here in Washington State. We just had a town hall on fentanyl. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is an issue that impacts every single solitary person, regardless of their background or where they're at. I just spoke to a woman last night up in Thurston County whose brother accidentally died. Thought he was taking cocaine and it was laced with fentanyl. And so I think we need to secure the southern border. We need to build the wall and do whatever we can do to secure the southern border. We need to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. And then we need to reverse the release, catch and release policy. This is critically important. Camas was named one of the best places to live, and it's one of the best places to live because it's a safe community, and we need to make sure that all communities throughout the 3rd Congressional District are safe.
Now, and I should mention, I don't know if anyone brought up, but Leslie, you are a Republican, John, you're running as an independent.
That's correct.
So, okay, just wanted to get that on. And to follow up on that, there was in the Senate a bipartisan agreement regarding much of the border policy, and Republicans, specifically Donald Trump, scuttled that plan. What were your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that, there was a reason why it was not passed. We need to make sure that we are actually securing the southern border. We're stopping, we're stopping this we're encouraging the remain in Mexico and reversing the release, catch and release policies.
And you don't think that bill would have done that?
No.
Okay, now, John, your thoughts on the border and immigration?
Yeah, I think there's a lack of honesty in this whole conversation. When we talk about fentanyl absolutely is an issue, and it's an issue of great concern. However, the statistics of arrest, over 90% or roughly 90% of the fentanyl that comes across the border is through ports of entry, and it is roughly 90% American citizens that are bringing that across the border. So when we talk about closing the border and we talk about fentanyl, I think we should be careful to identify, are we talking about putting a wall up to stop people from illegally crossing the border, implying that they are bringing fentanyl across the open spaces, or are we talking about clamping down on the ports of entry and making that more secure? Second of all, this open border or the immigration issue has been in place through multiple administrations, and it's been kept in place for a reason. And there's a significant amount of lobbying that goes into Congress from the big business vested interests that rely on cheap, exploitable labor. And our economy has come to depend on that. And absolutely, it's a problem. The more people that come into this country that saturate our labor market, our wages go down, and we're competing with people that are willing to work for less and in worse conditions. And in my view, this is not going to be solved by putting up a wall or deporting X amount of people. This is going to be done through legislation and getting control of who it is that we allow in a controlled manner, and get legitimate workers that are on the books paying taxes and citizens of this country to participate in this labor market.
But how do we gain that control? What can Congress do?
Our Congress can come together and, well, for example, there's a backlog of, I don't know how many thousands of people waiting for trials to have their cases looked at, to be made, to have a determination of if they're, if they're seeking refuge from another country, or, whatever the case may be. And while those people wait in limbo, that backlog continues to build. So let's address this legislative issue that we have in front of us. And furthermore, we talk about all these Venezuelans that are coming up, and, this influx of Venezuelan immigrants. Well, we need to take a look at what our country is doing with other countries in the way of economic sanctions that we are imposing on Venezuela, absolutely cratering their economy. And these people who these people are having to leave their homeland, the land that their family is from, the land that they love, to either escape or find a better life. And we have a considerable role in negatively impacting that economy, forcing them to seek a better life. So,
No, Leslie, John mentioned, this issue has continued through multiple presidential administrations, many years of Congress. Why hasn't it been fixed?
Which issue?
The border.
Yeah.
And immigration policy.
Yeah, I think, I think that sometimes it's just a matter of priorities. Sometimes, just like at the city of Camas, you go through and you prioritize a number of different issues, but, at the city of Camas's budgetary issues, something else pops up, a different crisis pops up, and it gets kicked down the road a little bit. But as we can see right now, there's over 10 million illegal immigrants that have crossed the southern border since Biden took office. And this is a problem. As I said before, I sit on the city council. I know what it's like to be a small municipality and the small budget that we have. We cannot afford these it's a tax on these smaller towns and communities. You don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the ability to manage that. Much like what we're seeing with the homeless crisis right now. I mean, it's really taxing municipalities, and it's really a crisis right now, especially not only just the amount of people that are crossing the border, but the amount of violence that we're seeing when a 12-year-old girl is repeatedly raped for hours on end. And we have people that are being killed, women and men and whatnot. The violence has just skyrocketed. And we have a law and order crisis, along with a border crisis, along with a drug crisis. And I think that's a number one issue for Americans. And so,
the story about the 12-year-old girl, which got a lot of media play, are you aware that story's more than a decade old?
No, I'm talking about a recent story,
Okay.
of a 12-year-old girl who was dragged under the underpass and she was raped for 2 hours. This is a recent. Yes. And then there was the mom of 4 or 5 that was bludgeoned to death in her own home. These are real stories. These are happening right now. And I think that we can't ignore it anymore. We absolutely can't ignore it. And I personally found it very concerning when my Democrat opponent said nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border. And she's on video saying this. And
why weren't those things fixed when Trump was first in office and Republicans had control of both chambers?
Well, it certainly was a more secure southern border than it is right now. That's for sure. I mean, we have a crisis on our hands. 10 million illegal immigrants have crossed the border. We have a skyrocketing drug crisis. We have violence at an all-time high. Look, I sit on the city school subcommittee.
No, violent crime's down, actually.
I'd like to see your source, but I know from my own personal perspective, boots on the ground in Camas, Washington, that the amount of drugs and gun violence has increased within our community.
Thank you. Craig?
One of the things that's a local issue, of course, is the interstate bridge replacement project. So now both of you, I think, have talked about advocating for planning and construction of a third Columbia River crossing as well. So I'm interested, do you support the current IBR project? And if you were to they were to start work on a third project, would that money come from the IBR planning process, or would that be a completely new source of money and office to be tapped? So, John, you want to tackle that question first?
yeah, can I just go back to what we were just discussing, just to clear this up? I mean, this is the thing with our politics these days, is there's no honesty with the American people. There is this conflagration and this rhetoric, this inflammatory rhetoric that is tearing apart the people. Now, yes, those stories are tragic. They're absolutely tragic. And one person being raped is one person too many. And we have to be honest, though, with the millions of undocumented workers that are coming across, or illegal immigrants, however you want to term that are coming across the border. the percentage of those that are committing these heinous crimes is absolutely minuscule. And so demonizing a population of people that are here either escaping what the lives that they were leading south of the border or wherever they came from and seeking a better life here, the vast majority of these people are hardworking people seeking a better life. They're not rapists, they're not murderers, they're not drug addicts, they're not bringing drugs across the border. And so we need to quit with this inflammatory rhetoric that is just throwing fuel on the fire and creating an environment of hate. And that's not what we need. We need to be honest about these problems. And, another thing that, goes unrecognized often is our birth rate. Our birth rate is on the decline, far below what's needed to even sustain or build our population. We've come to rely on this influx of immigration. In my view, give the people of this country a reason to want to bring children into this world and grow a family. I mean, absolutely. I mean, and the labor market and everything is like, think back to the days when we could sustain a household with one person working and have the other parent stay home. I don't remember those days because I've never lived those. But
Okay, thank you. I think we're gonna move on.
let's be honest. Let's be honest with the border and stop conflating this inflammatory rhetoric of rapists, murderers, and drug addicts.
One point of clarification, keep it short.
Okay.
So just to clarify, we don't know who's coming across our southern border. We don't know if they're criminals. We don't know who they are because they're not being properly vetted. As an attorney, I believe in law and order, and we have a system in place right now. I would like to see people come here legally. I think that's important. We're a land of immigrants, but we have a legal process. Let's allow that legal process to take place, and let's incentivize people to come here the right way.
And just real quick, believing in law and order, do you support a convicted felon for president?
I am supporting Donald Trump for president of the United States. Yes,
convicted felon.
I am on the record. I have issued an op-ed that is in the Daily Caller, and that's on my website.
Okay. John, who are you supporting for president?
I'll just tell you, I don't support any president that wishes to continue this genocide going on in Gaza.
Okay. Back
The
to
I-5
president.
bridge. I would like to know your opinion on the I-5 bridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I just sat in traffic and I imagine Leslie did as well because of the backup that was on I-5. And that's not an anomaly. That is an issue that absolutely needs to be addressed. And our infrastructure is just in decline. And that is because we have, as a country, have chosen to invest in wars abroad rather than our own infrastructure, our own education. And so specifically to the bridge, absolutely, we need to replace that. And in my view, the federal government should be able to provide the funds necessary to complete a project that is going to meet the growing needs of the traffic, whether you include light rail. I believe light rail would be a benefit not only to the local businesses in downtown Vancouver, it would allow for people to transit back and forth across the river and to the waterfront and so many other things. I don't see the negatives that oftentimes get, thrown around about including a light rail. But yes, absolutely. Our infrastructure has been lagging for far too many years and we are behind the times.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
So I did sit on the Regional Transportation Commission. So Washougal and Camas actually share a position. It's 2 years for Camas, then 2 years for Washougal. I've actually talked to the mayor of Camus, Steve Hogan, to say, I really think that we should be extending that to a 4-year term because these issues are so critically important. So I've been an advocate for all transportation projects here in Southwest Washington. I did have a front row seat at some of the discussions for the locally preferred alternative to the I-5 corridor. It's the transportation issues in Washington State are something that I have been researching and studying for years and years. My concern with the I-5 bridge, I want to see it replaced. I want to see it fixed. I want to have that flow of commerce going across state lines. I think that's absolutely critically essential. My concern is that the U.S. Coast Guard for the locally preferred alternative said the bridge was too low. And we saw what happened to the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I like to rely on our experts in that situation. And the reason, or one of the reasons why the bridge height was too low was because the weight of the light rail. So sitting on the Regional Transportation Commission, what I've noticed, and it's a point that you've made, we have a lot of people with different agendas and they go back and forth. And it seems like the I-5 bridge has gotten caught in the crosshairs of just the entire discussion around light rail. So instead of focusing on other issues such as reducing congestion by increasing lanes and whatnot, the sole focus of the argument tends to center right around light rail. And I think that's a problem because the voters here in Southwest Washington have voted light rail down 3 separate times.
So should the project continue with the locally preferred alternative, or should the project be slow?
Well, it was voted ahead, right? So it's moving ahead. So we
Right.
we
Would
had
you-
our
would you
democratic
like to-
process
Right.
move ahead. I voted no at the time on the locally preferred alternative because of my concerns from the U.S. Coast Guard. But I am absolutely 100% committed to doing everything that we can to increase our commerce and to make reduce congestion and to keep this a vital, healthy economic area.
Okay. So, but as a member of Congress, would you support this IBR project as adopted, or would you try to stop it?
I would not try to stop it. I have concerns with light rail, though.
Sure, but but would you support the project?
I would support the project and I really hope that we also do look at that third crossing that we've been in discussions for about 40 years for a third crossing.
Seems like it has been at least 40 years. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else, Brian?
No, that could be.
You both have mentioned that homelessness is, of course, a huge issue, not just here, but across the country. What, if anything, do you think Congress should or can do where homelessness is concerned? And John, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Well, as most people across this country know, it's getting harder and harder to just make it, just to keep your head above water. And I think now, on average, Americans are spending 40% of their income just on their housing. And that's a huge issue. And it all goes back to this financialized economy that has taken over our legislators, pouring billions of dollars to steer legislation in favor of the people that will benefit from those, the very few people that will benefit from that legislation, leaving us to squabble over the scraps. And the bigger issue that is steering all of this is a huge influx of money that pours into the reelection campaigns of our legislators, where they legislate to benefit those few people. And, you know, for housing, Lee Fong, an investigative journalist, did a really great article on a coordinated computer program that was used as a rental database for rental housing units and apartments across the country. And this program, the algorithm was written to specifically keep places either appear as occupied or unavailable, and it was skewing the numbers and putting the people who needed to rent a home and create a false shortage of
Given
housing for
given
rent.
that, what can Congress do about that? What role should Congress play?
Oh, Congress plays a huge role in that. Our federal government plays in a very important role in
What kind of
being the.
legislation would you say?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. So we would need to put in place mechanisms that prevent, whether it's, private, I guess it's going to be private entities that are amassing all of these properties, preventing them from putting in place these programs that are a detriment to the American people. And private equity is in scooping up all of these homes, and it results in us unable to get our foot in the door and own a home for ourselves.
Okay, Leslie, what can Congress do to address housing and homelessness?
Yeah, so this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I sit on the homeless subcommittee at the city of Camas, and I've been working with our regional partners here as well. I've toured a lot of different facilities. I've toured homeless camps. I've toured the tiny home shelters. I think right now, the good news is that we've been given some clear direction from the U.S. Supreme Court in Grants Pass on this case. I like seeing the local authority go back to local municipalities because I think they're the ones who know how best to address the situation. I think we need a coordinated approach. I think what we're seeing right now is that there is money coming in to address this crisis, but that money oftentimes doesn't get to the people that actually need it.
So let me go
Yeah,
back.
so federal funding needs to be tied to results-based programs. So
And when you say coordinated, meaning coordinated between whom?
coordinated between all entities, because so like ECHO, Indian Community Homeless Organization through the county, the right hand's not talking to the left hand on this issue. For example, one of the warming stations that exists here in Southwest Washington, there wasn't a coordinated approach, and we thought the weather was going to improve during the cold snap in January, and it didn't. And there was nowhere for people to go. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of issues for people to actually get the help that they need. So I have a lot of different ideas, but I want to see that federal funding tied to results-based programs. That's what I want. I have learned through my extensive research and studying this issue, you cannot build or spend your way out of this problem. It's going to be a coordinated effort to make sure that we approach it in a holistic manner, that we look at mental health, drug addiction. We look at what housing costs. I was just at a Realtors Association last night. The median income or housing cost is what, $650,000. At least that's what it was up in Thurston County. We need a comprehensive approach to address this issue. And my hope is to look at ways that we can address it at a younger generation, address it at school age issues surrounding mental health and the crisis there, because I want to prevent the next generation from becoming homeless.
Did you follow?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, Leslie, I guess that I understand that. So you were saying, lauding the Supreme Court decision about it reinforcing local control.
Yes.
And yet it sounds like you also want federal control. Are you saying more of like a coordination or clearinghouse?
No, you get federal funds for certain projects. And I think all federal funding, regardless of whether we're talking about the homeless issue or any other issue, it should be tied to results-based programs. You have to show your work. You have to show that this is successful, that it's actually working. So I think that's pretty much it at that level. The federal level is any federal funds that you receive should be tied to results-based programs. And there are a lot of programs, especially along the West Coast, that are simply just housing first. And that is it. That's the only way that they want to approach this crisis. And I think it's wrong. And I think that it's naive. And I think that it ignores the multifaceted problem that we have.
Ben?
Well, first of all, thank you both for being here again. My question is, what would you say your biggest similarity and your biggest difference is to the incumbent? John, where do you go first?
Well, what led me to jump into this race was Marie's support, continued support for what's going on over in Gaza. It's an absolute atrocity, and her support for the Ukraine war. And both of these conflicts, like so many conflicts in the past, our federal government and our news media is not being honest with the American people. We base our decisions on information that we're given, and when we are given a narrative that does not accurately reflect the true nature of how we got to where we are, then the people are going to be led down a path that they probably wouldn't find themselves on. And so I am here to bring some truth, like I said, into this and help people see things for what they really are and the path that we are headed down.
So if I understand correctly, you would not support federal funding for Israel and for Ukraine?
No, absolutely not. And the reason why is the conflict in Ukraine, that didn't start in February of 2022. The conflict in Gaza, that did not start on October 7th. There is a long history of very important steps, diplomatic and otherwise, steps that have been taken along the way to lead us to where we are right now. And that story is not being told.
So would it be more effective? Would it be better for the American people if we just stayed out of them?
It would be more effective if we sought diplomatic solutions rather than war.
And then follow up Ben's question, where do you agree with Marie?
I mean, I guess the issues of, let's see. Well, that's a good question. Because, so here's the thing, is oftentimes we hear our representatives say one thing. They say they support certain policies, or they say they support certain things, but then their voting record tells a different story. And so, the things that she says, for women's rights, to abortion, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think women should. I don't think it's the legislator's position to get in between a woman's choice of what she does with her body and the doctor. That's just
Okay, thanks.
not
Ben,
where
come
we
back
should
to
be.
that, actually.
Yeah.
Leslie, where do you agree and disagree with Marie?
So I disagree with her. I think she's out of touch with the constituents here in Southwest Washington. The things that I see her focused on and the things that I see her trying to advocate for are not the concerns that I have heard from the folks here in Southwest Washington. They are her classic video that nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border, I think, is the main critical difference. I don't think that there can be one example of how out of touch she actually is. When I have to meet with parents and law enforcement officers who have held people in their arms as they've died from fentanyl, I think that just shows that she's out of touch, and I don't think she expected to win, and she did, and she's trying to walk a fine line right now with her votes to look like she's moderate, but I don't think that she is.
And then where do you agree with her?
I'm not sure. I can't figure out anywhere that I agree with her. I mean, she says she's for law and order, and yet she and her husband were fixing leaf blowers for free to have Antifa members use them to spread tear gas during the Summer of Love, the 177 nights.
Antifa members?
Antifa
Did they
members.
look on the internet and find these Antifa members?
You can dig through and find the source. Then she's been caught bragging to her New York donors that she wants to revamp the Blue Dog Democrats into rural Antifa. And that's exactly out of the 5,000 people that I door knocked. They said that's what they don't want. They don't want the violence coming across the river. They don't want Antifa over here. They don't want the crime and the homelessness. And so those two things combined right there together show that I don't think she has the interests of the voters and the constituents here in Southwest Washington at heart. And she says she's a fifth generation Washingtonian, but she grew up in Texas. Is she a logger? Is she a mechanic? Is she a moderate? Is she a Democrat? I think that there's a lot of questions about her. She's in a Republican district, a district that Trump won by 4 points in 2020. And a district that Tiffany Smiley won by 8 points in 2022. And I think she's doing anything and everything she can do right now to stay alive. And I think it doesn't help right now that at the top of the ticket, Biden is an absolute utter failure. And there's massive concerns to the point where we're watching the Democrat Party unravel minute by minute. She can't prop herself up on his policies because they've been failing, and she can't prop herself up on him.
Then, I want to touch on John talked about policies, economic policies, how they affect people. The tax cuts for individuals are scheduled to expire next year. Would you support extending those? And how would you handle corporate taxes? Should there be additional tax cuts? Should we go back to the previous rates? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are I would like to see a very limited government. I want to get back to the 3 branches of government that our forefathers envisioned. And over time, we've increasingly had a bloated, growing government system. And we have a 4th branch of government that's comprised of a bunch of unelected, unaccountable
So what would you-
bureaucrats.
Does that mean you're into Social Security?
No, absolutely not.
Well, that's a pretty big branch of government that wasn't part of the forefathers.
That is true, but no, I would not.
Okay, so that's.
So the Chevron rule just got overturned. So I think we're going to see significant improvement and movement on that respect with respect to.
But what
government.
about tax rates? How do you handle this?
I think that the best government is local government. I want to fight to limit taxation. When I sit at the city of Camas and when they are proposing a new utility bill, a utility tax, I fought against that. I was one of the 3. It was a 3-4 vote. I voted against it. And I heard from our senior citizens, because we get told all the time, it's just a cup of coffee. It's just a cup of coffee. Well, these cups of coffee add up, and these people are being priced out of their communities. I have
So
people on a
you would
fixed
be in
income.
favor of extending the individual tax cuts that
Yes.
passed in 2017. So then what programs would you cut to offset that?
There's a lot of programs. I mean, look, again, sitting on the city of Camas, there's always fraud, abuse, and waste at every single solitary level. When I ask,
So you think you can find $4 trillion?
yes, I do. I mean, look, you get taxed to death and you're going to find savings in a variety of situations. So fraud, abuse, waste at every level. I think that every department should have to pass a financial audit, including the Department of Defense. I think that we have a classic example of government waste was Biden's $320 million Gaza port that sank into the ocean less than 31 days of it being there. That's what I'm talking about. You want to go further? Let's talk about the free crack pipes. I mean, there's a lot of fraud, abuse, and waste.
You don't think Congress is currently looking for fraud, abuse, and waste?
I'm sure that they are, but we have a spending problem. We absolutely do. And it is on both sides of the aisle. Let's be clear. I'm a mom of 4. I buy the groceries for my family of 6. I'm constantly having to put items back on the shelf. And that's what Congress should do. If it's not in your budget, you should not be buying it.
And so you don't think they're doing that now?
I think they could do a lot better.
John, your thoughts on the 2017 tax cuts? Would you extend the tax cuts for individuals, and how would you handle corporate tax rates?
Yeah, us people who work every day, we are taxed plenty. That's not the problem. But over the years, as I had mentioned earlier, the lobbying efforts of the corporate class has steered legislation and has put themselves in a position where they've enjoyed great tax savings, whether it's through loopholes or whether it's through, from the 2017 tax cuts. And those are revenues that our country depends on. And so when you continue cutting the amount of money that is coming into our government, and the solution then is, oh, we're broke now, so now we got to start cutting all these programs. We live in a system that is rife with corporate welfare. People talk about what a drain the poor people are on the system, and relying on welfare and not pulling their weight and all this stuff. That fails to miss the point of the vast amounts of money that is being diverted, siphoned off from the backs of us hardworking Americans, going to the top and then never coming back down through this trickle down.
And
This trickle down, policy, or the, theory of economics.
I'm sorry, and what do you do for a living? I don't know.
I work as a real-time operator for a renewable energy company. In fact, I'm on night shifts, and I'm on about 4 hours of sleep right now.
That's tough.
Yeah, and I've worked in the energy industry for over 13 years now, and at the highest levels of grid operations, real-time operator in a control room. So,
And another quick question, you're running as an independent, which party would you caucus with if you were elected?
I mean, I would probably, land more on the Democrat side, but so this is the other thing is I grew up a Democrat, and when I believed that the Democrats were the party of human rights, the party of anti-war, the party of the people. And as time went on, I realized that this party just started deviating more and more away from what I thought was what I believed in. And as time has gone on, the Democrats and the Republicans, they don't represent the American people. They don't represent our needs. They're out of touch. They represent this massive amount of lobbying interests that go into their campaign financing to keep them elected. And we end up with legislators that turn into millionaires and are completely out of touch with the American people.
Excuse me. Leslie, would you seek to be a member of the Freedom Caucus?
No.
Oh. And regarding, I think a lot of people have ideas about how Congress should work. It can often be different once you get into place there. And in some cases, on both sides of the aisle, we see some of the silliness come out. That being said, how would you have voted if you were in Congress? How would you have voted when Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker?
So I always ask myself two questions when I'm at the city of Camas. Is this a problem for us to fix? What are the unintended consequences? And the third part is, how does this help my constituents? I don't think that helped the American people whatsoever. So I would have voted for stability.
And John, did you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, the turmoil and the semantics that go on in Congress, we lose. In a Congress that is so sharply divided, people are so entrenched in their ways. Now, I can sit next to Leslie, and as she's saying certain things, I can agree with many of the things that she says. And that needs to be recognized because we're sitting on opposite sides of the table, well, next to each other, but that we fail to recognize the commonalities that we share and the big issues that need to be addressed, and instead focus on these wedge issues that keep us polarized. And the result is we have an American people all across this country who are so sharply divided along party lines. We're unable to recognize what we share in common. And additional to all of that, it keeps us as a constituency weak and divided. If we are able to come together as an American people and overcome these issues and address the big issues that we all agree are a problem, the American people would be unstoppable. But that is not in the interest of our government to allow that to happen, to allow us to come together and be one voting bloc, you know?
Now, next question on your website under local issues, the first listing is education.
Yeah.
Just real quick, would you support the abolition of the Department of Education as is called for in Project 2025?
No.
Okay, Leslie,
I haven't even read whatever project you're referring to, so.
would you support the abolition of
I
the?
am going back to my original statement. I think that all federal funding should be tied to results-based programs. So if you can show that you're successful, you can continue to receive federal funding.
But would you support abolishing the Federal Department of Education?
I answered your question. I think all federal funding should be tied to results-based programs.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So here's the thing is if a school is failing and a school is in need of, it's not meeting these desired goals, the answer is not to further restrict funding. And the answer is not to just push them down further. There's a problem there. There's a problem that needs to be addressed, whether it's an economic solution because there's so much poverty in that community and the kids don't have the support that they need either at home or, whatever the case may be. And so I'm not saying the answer to everything is just throw more money at it, but we need to address the root causes of these problems. And so, pulling more resources away from our already failing education is not the answer. We look at China and we look at how their economy is exploding. We're having to impose tariffs because according to Janet Yellen, China is overproducing. What is overproducing? Overproducing is in my view, overproducing or overproduction is a sign of great success because you have built an economy or a manufacturing industry that has become efficient and effective. But that misses the point because what education has to do with all of that? Education is an investment in the future. And if we continue to fail to invest in our education and we continue to allow our schools to have to cut programs because they don't have the funding that they need to keep their programs in place. 1 second, please. Then we lose in the future. Okay, and we continue to on this decline.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm a proponent of public education. I'm a product of public education. My kids are in public school. I sit on the city school subcommittee. for that. I saw the budgetary restrictions that they were struggling with, and I saw how they were trying to reconcile those problems. We have 70, at least the last time I looked, 70,000 public school students that have unenrolled from public schools since COVID. That is a problem for funding for public schools. I would like to keep public schools afloat, but I think that just continuing to throw money at the situation doesn't necessarily resolve it. I think that there's a holistic approach that you need to take, and parents do need to be put back in the driver's seat. Parents need to be welcomed back. I know firsthand that there were times where I didn't feel like the school wanted to hear from me as a parent, and that's a problem. That's a problem. If I don't feel welcome at the table, if I don't feel like they're listening to the parent who knows what my child's needs are, who watched each one of them, each 4 of them who have very different learning needs and strengths and weaknesses, I have a real problem with that. I'm the one that knows what's best for my child. And I think until we can have our schools bring the parents back to the table and make them feel welcome, we're going to continue to see more and more unenrollment. We have homeschool enrollment is up 40% since COVID. Private school enrollment is up. That's a problem, and that problem cannot 100% be solved by funding.
I want to move on now. Echo Ben's question earlier. Very briefly, give me one area you agree, one area you disagree with President Biden. Tell me something he's done well.
I don't think he's done anything well.
Nothing?
I think he's an
Nothing at all.
abject failure. He will go down in history as the worst president in America, worse than Jimmy Carter. I think from very first day, when he reversed all of the border policies to his just ridiculous pullout of Afghanistan. Look, Putin took territory from Ukraine under Obama's administration and under Biden's administration. I think that's a problem. I think we've been weak on the national foreign policy or on the foreign policy stage. And I think it's a problem. And I think we're putting our own kids at risk. I have 4 children. I don't want them to go to war.
So he hasn't done anything well.
Well, first of all, has he done anything? That's the elephant in the room right now. Who is actually at the helm? I don't think he is cognitively aware whatsoever. I have some real concerns, and my concern is that the Democrat Party is circling around the wagon, trying to prop up a man who should not be in office. I mean, this guy has the nuclear code, for crying out loud. And the fact that they try to be this transparent and open party, this is the biggest lie that we've been sold for the past 4 years.
And speaking of which, who do you believe is the legitimately elected president?
President Biden.
Okay.
And he should be responsible for all of this.
John, what's something you agree, something you disagree with Biden?
Disagree on our continued efforts of regime change and war efforts around the world, investing billions of dollars and destroying lives around the world instead of investing in our own country, in our own education and infrastructure. Something that I would agree on, there are things that, like, for example, and this is tough to say because I don't know every detail of what's in the Inflation Reduction Act, but for the most part, I think that was a positive benefit to the country. Now, it has its faults, or it has its weaknesses, I guess, because so much of what was in that Inflation Reduction Act for infrastructure is bottlenecked because we don't have the transmission capabilities to transmit the energy that is produced if we are to build those renewable energy generating stations. And which so often is the case is, I read the other day I can't remember the exact number of of battery charging stations that were planned for, you know, are a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, but I think up to date, I think 2 have been built. And that's a problem of this bureaucracy where things go in, they have great ideas, they have good intentions, but then it gets tied up in this process that never gets down to the people.
I want to move along.
Yeah, of
Then
course.
real quick, you answered this earlier. Would you support a national ban on abortion?
No.
Great. Any other questions?
I've got
Yeah, I wanted to go, okay, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay, maybe we're the same. I wanted to ask real quickly about the Columbia River. There is right now an agreement between the federal government, tribes, many parties about trying to save salmon as well as the irrigation, transportation, etc. And of course, our power grid as well. What do you think should be done with the Columbia River? And again, with our needs for hydropower and salmon, etc. And John, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so the Columbia River is a huge part of what this region relies on, for energy production and for irrigation, for flood control, and for shipping goods up and down the river. Taking out those dams at this point in time, that is not a realistic solution. It would have far too many impacts that we don't have an answer for at this time. And for, you know, for energy, the Columbia River is a massive source of clean, renewable hydropower. And it is having a detrimental effect on the salmon. We pour billions of dollars into the hatchery program to sustain the salmon runs. However, what's on decline are the native salmon runs that, you know, our native brothers and sisters, that's their livelihood, that's their heritage, that is what they have, you know, that is part of them. And for us to just turn a blind eye to that and not consider that important would be the wrong thing to do. The solution, we need to figure out why it is the native salmon runs are on decline. And we need to figure out at some point if these rivers are, you know, going to continue to cause irreparable harm. We need to figure out, look forward, and how is it that we are going to move away from this system that we have in place. But as of right now, I mean, with all of the reasons I mentioned before, it's not realistic to take that away.
Okay, Leslie.
So I love salmon. I think it's critical and important to our heritage here in Washington State. I think I even authored a law review article that's published years ago on the issue on salmon restoration and what we can do for the salmon. I think I agree. I don't think that breaching dams is going to solve any kind of problem. I think you have sea lions that are picking off salmon. I think you have ocean fishing that is dwindling the population as well. We are seeing a resurgence, and I think that's great. And I think we want to do anything and everything that we can do to restore very healthy, vibrant salmon population. But go ahead and go up to the rural counties who already have problems with their power grids. That would be detrimental to them to breach these dams.
Thanks.
Correct.
So this question is for Leslie. So how do your policies differ from Joe Kent's, and why are your ideas better?
So I like to focus on myself. I am a Reagan Republican. I have proven results. I have 3 published law review articles on core conservative values. For the past 3.5 years, I've been delivering results to the folks here in Southwest Washington while he's been talking. I think that he represents an ideological horseshoe. On one end, you've got the fact that he was a registered Democrat who voted for Bernie Sanders, coming across the river from Portland just to run. And then on the other end of the spectrum, he has, far right white supremacist ties. I believe in limited government. I think that he has been a proponent of bigger government solutions for every problem that we have. That's a big difference. He's also a neo-isolationist, and I think that would be detrimental to the 3rd Congressional District. I think that he fails to understand that in Washington State, we have 75 ports, 17 of those ports are right here in this district, and we need good trading allies.
John, did you have any reaction to that?
To each their own. I mean, there's plenty of things that I disagree on Joe Kent with, and but back, this all goes back to this very divisive atmosphere that we find ourselves in, and my whole thing about all of this is, let's be honest and let's have a dialogue. We've lost the ability to have disagreements and discuss them like adults and have that exchange of thought. We have become so polarized that everything just is like a match to gasoline, and it blows up, and then nothing comes of it.
If I could just add on to that, I think we're at a critical crossroads in America on both sides of the aisle. I think that what Americans should want is to elect good governing individuals. I think that you have on both sides of the aisle folks that are out there to increase their own brand, and they use angertainment, as I like to call it, to kind of whip up that buzzword frenzy and get people hot and bothered, but they don't really offer any solutions. And that was a concern of mine in 2022. I did not hear what was going to be anything that would help me as a mom of 4 make my life better.
Did you vote for Joe Kent?
In the general, I did.
Not in the primary.
No, I did not.
Any other questions?
No,
And give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements if you like. We'll start with Leslie.
So I'm really proud of the campaign that we've run. I have endorsements from a wide variety of individuals, city council members, mayors, port commissioners, sheriffs, elected leaders in Washington State, through the entire spectrum of Republicans. I know that that's what it's going to take to flip the seat back. You're going to need all of those voters. And I think that I am the candidate that can bring true unity back to the party. I worked for Rob McKenna back in the past, when he was still on King County Council, when he was a transportation chair. That's kind of how I got my feet wet with transportation issues. Really proud of that endorsement. I keep adding to my endorsements, and that's really, it's a proud moment, but I also know that endorsements don't win elections, because if that was the case, Joe would have won in last cycle. People should vote for me because Washington deserves better. They deserve a representative who will help secure that southern border. They deserve a representative who will limit taxes. They deserve a representative who will put parents back in the driver's seat with respect to their children's education. And they deserve a representative who wants to restore law and order to make our communities safe again. And they deserve somebody who knows these issues and has the tool belt and who can get to work on day one representing the needs of Southwest Washington. So they do deserve better, and I intend to continue to keep delivering.
Thank you. John?
Well, I don't have any endorsements. In fact, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party both probably dislike me equally as much. And the
Do you see
reason-
that as a plus?
I mean, yeah, I don't feel like the parties represent the people anymore. And I think there's a huge influx of money that is diverting the attention away from the hardworking people that are making this country work. And so my message is, I'm always going to be truthful. I'm always going to be honest. I'm not going to engage in inflammatory rhetoric that is going to just rile up people and hate the other people more than they already do. And I seek to move away from voting out of fear. We've come to this place and we're approaching this election, and I have no illusions. My chances of pulling this off is, the deck is heavily stacked against me, and I accept that, and that's just fine. But as a country and as the constituents of Southwest Washington, we need to move away from voting for somebody out of fear of the other opponent, that they're going to ruin the country, or that they're a Marxist or a communist or whatever gets thrown around. This is the point, and it doesn't address the needs of the people. Our education, our infrastructure, our environment, all of these things are in sharp decline. And with the amount of money that continues to pour into our elections, including from a foreign entity that does not have our best interests at heart, as that money pours in and diverts the legislation away from to benefit us, we pay the price. And I encourage anyone, any candidate that you're interested in, go to the FEC website, go to Open Secrets, go look at where their campaign finances come from. And that will tell you a much different story of what it is that they truly support and where their motives lie. Me, personally, I will not accept any contributions from anybody who is not an individual contributor. No political action committees, no special interests, no nothing. You can look and there will be a name down that list of anyone who has contributed to my campaign. Now you go look at, the incumbent Marie, and this is not just specific to Marie. This is plaguing our Congress, where she sits on the agriculture board. She's got 10 or 12. The exact number escapes me. Different political action committees associated with the sugar industry. Sugar industry is a huge deal. It goes largely unnoticed. The farm bill is up for reauthorization. We have a sugar tariff in place where American people pay 2 times the price of sugar than the rest of the world on average. Now, I'm not advocating that we need more sugar in our diet. That's not the point here. But that paying double the price of sugar has far-reaching impacts on other things beyond or economic things for jobs and for companies that rely on that commodity to produce their goods. Well, if they can go to Mexico and they can get the price of sugar at half of what they pay here, chances are they're going to move elsewhere. And so we need to look at this insane amount of money that is pouring into these campaigns and realize that none of that is steering legislation in our favor.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you for joining us.